Welcome to another episode of the Patio Pondering podcast. Today is another solo episode. I'm going to be talking about land use in our area. This all stemmed from a Patio Pondering essay I wrote talking about just because you can doesn't mean you should. That essay was prompted by a discussion on the Little Red Barn podcast hosted by Ryan Martin, where he and a guest were talking about land use in Kosciuszko County, particularly about a data center that was planned for the Leesburg, Indiana area. And I was prompted to talk about that land use based upon Ryan's comment that agriculture is great at preserving farm ground when we have major projects with major headlines, but not very good when we lose farm ground to small projects like the 5, 10, 15 acre housing development or the 5, 10 acre executive estates that are being built in many areas. And we just kind of sit back and let that go. And the guest responded with, there is an unwritten rule in agriculture that we don't criticize or protest when another person makes decisions on their land use. And that got me thinking. There's so many things in our life around land use that we have no control over. And in the podcast, Ryan talked about how he has an easement on his ground because he has a regulated drain going through his farm. And that the barn that is on his farm sits within that 75-foot easement because the barn was there before the regulated drain was enacted. Now, if he tried to build that barn today, he would have to go through some permitting to get approval to place that barn within that easement. That's one example of where we don't have the ability to do with our ground what we want. He brought up a couple other ideas. I mean, he talked about in his specific situation, they're trying to put up a high tunnel barn to raise plants and vegetables for sale. They have to get permitted because the structure is, for whatever reason, for Kosciuszko County. And then I think about where we are in Northeast Indiana and particularly DeKalb County. We are landowners in DeKalb County, and I farm in DeKalb County. And our heritage in DeKalb County goes back a long ways. My great-great-great-grandfather Christ emigrated from Ohio and purchased farm ground in Concord Township in the years before the Civil War. And our family has maintained ownership of that ground. My great-grandfather Baker moved from Defiance County into DeKalb County and bought his farm ground that we still own in Newville Township. So we have a long history in DeKalb County. And recently there's been a massive push to put in industrial solar farms in eastern DeKalb County. The biggest one was beaten by the commissioners or county council. I don't remember which actually acts the project, but that project has raised its head again. And it's raised its head again because there are 3 landowners that stand to make massive amounts of money from a solar farm if it is approved. Massive, to the tune of $1,000, $1,500 per acre rent, which is crazy. But there's a massive push in DeKalb County, particularly those that live near and around the potential solar farm, to push against it. This is the case where people in the area are trying to tell a farm owner what they can and cannot do with their farm ground. And their reasoning is that it changes the aesthetics of the community, it changes the property values, and they're bringing up arguments against the positive attributes that are shown by the proponents, talking about how the jobs that they talk about are just temporary jobs and will only be there when the construction happens. Once the construction is done and they put a padlock on the fence, those jobs are gone. And in many cases, those are not local jobs. They're also pushing back against the tax revenue. The projections they claim are off because there might be abatements. I don't know the specifics, but those people are pushing against it because of the effect on the community at large. And this really goes against the private rights, property rights. I can do what I want with my ground. So I'm torn as both a landowner that is positive property rights and someone that wants to preserve heritage and nostalgia and what the ground is right now. And I think about where we talk about how we're going to raise food for the masses and preserving farm ground, and think about the recent reports by the USDA where they said corn, soybean, wheat acreage in the main corn, soybean, wheat growing areas was going to be flat or up. And that's just not the case. It can't be. It can't be flat. It cannot be flat because we're losing ground to subdivisions. We're losing them to solar projects. We're losing them to industrial expansion. And we're also losing them to alternative agricultural production. And what I mean by that, in our particular area, farm ground is coming out of crop and hay production and being put into farmsteads that are 5, 10, 15, 20 acres in size. And those farmsteads contain horses and pasture ground being taken out of row crop production. So we are not at status quo with acreage, regardless of what USDA reports and urban planners say. So the crossroads that we're at is, how do we preserve that farm ground? Or should we preserve that farm ground? Because once you put concrete on it, once you tear it up, once you put a racetrack on it, once you put a solar panel on it, it is no longer farm ground, regardless of what the proponents say about remediation and saving the ground. So at what point should we preserve farm ground? Because it is, unlike many things in our life, a limited resource. Once it's gone, it's gone. Now, people will say, well, look at you. You live on a farm that really was taken from another farm. Yep, you got it. We own 23 acres that was cut off from an 80-acre farm. I won't deny it. This happened in 2000 before we moved here. So we're the beneficiaries of it. My parents' house, where I grew up in northeast Fort Wayne, was a subdivision that was taken out of farm production in the 60s so that those houses could be built in the 70s. And we're beneficiaries of it. So I could say I'm being a hypocrite. Yep, I wear that hat. But I think that we're making a lot of decisions on farm ground preservation or lack of preservation without really thinking about what's going to happen. Now, sure, Allen County and DeKalb County have their comprehensive plans and how farm ground fits into preserving or maintaining growth. I get that. And most every county in the state or in the union should have a comprehensive plan. But in many cases, that comprehensive plan is trumped with zoning appeals or plan commissions that say, oh, it's just farm ground. This will provide more opportunities and more tax revenue, and it'll benefit the county much more than just farm ground. Yeah, probably. That's right. But how many times do we look at things in our life and say, it's worth saving at the expense of something? It's worth having this park because we get things for the community other than tax revenue or monetary benefits. That's just one example. So I don't know. I know that we're going to be losing some farm ground this year that is going to turn into farmettes, executive estates. I know. Just got the phone call from a landlord that he's going to have to sell. And when he mentioned the auction company he's going to use, I know how the farm's going to be broken up. I'm preparing that this will be the last year that we farm that ground because I can see how the auction company will break it up, and probably a company shed and some pastures, not ground that is designed for a 40-foot planter and combines and modern row crop production. So I'm putting on my heritage nostalgia hat and thinking about how should we preserve farm ground as we balance preservation of bare dirt that we grow crops on with advancing a community. And it's a tough decision. It's not black and white, but it's a decision that we as a society have to tackle, whether we like it or not. So just a little bit of rambling by me, thinking about land use policies. And I've got an invitation out to a land use expert in our area that I hope will accept the invitation and give us some insight into decision process and how they balance the needs of the community with private property rights and preserving open spaces. Thank you to all my followers. I appreciate all the comments, all the follows, and we'll continue our journey of hitting timely ag topics and diving into people's agriculture roots and how those agriculture roots formed them into the people that they are today.